Yan. Kamusta kayo dyan? Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Ayan na naman tayo. Throughout the... Yan natin magaya si Bitag. Um, Kaya natin si Trump. No, seriously. Seriously, guys. Sorry ngayon lang ako nakahabol. Kakatapos ko lang na may ibang trabaho natin. Obviously, with all of the interviews and all that, now naman it's the writing part. So, kailangan na natin mag-analyze ano ba talaga itong implication ng pagka-panalo ni Donald Trump because, whether you like it or not, meron itong implication all around the world, including para sa Pilipinas. In fact, kahapon lang si Philippine Ambassador to Washington DC, si Ambassador Maldes, who also we interviewed dito sa show natin on our TV program among others, has already urged yung ating mga kabayan na naka TNT dyan sa Amerika to reconsider their options and to return to the Philippines voluntarily kasi the expectation talaga dito is, guys, things are gonna look very, very tight and very, very strict in the coming years once the second Trump administration comes in. So again, naintindihan ko marami tayong mga followers, marami tayong mga kamag-anak, shout out na super Trumper and super pro-Trump and all of that. Siguro impressed kayo sa hairstyle niya, siguro impressed kayo sa kanyang golden shimmering furniture, siguro impressed kayo dun sa kanyang apparently show and persona, dun sa kanyang tapang and yabang, whatever. But let's talk about reality. Let's talk about real life policy implications. Now, kung ikaw ay isang Amerikano na maganda ng buhay mo, maganda ng kalagayan ng buhay mo, mga other things, good for you. Fantastic. Congratulations. I'm happy for you. I'm happy for my uncles. I'm happy for my late lolo. Who stayed decades and decades in Florida. So, marami tayong mga kamag-anak, people close to our heart na nagstay sa US or US citizen. Si Lola lang, God bless her soul, siya lang ayaw niya sa US at bumalik siya from US back in the day. Mas love niya ang Pilipinas, no? Paras kami ni Lola. Na joke lang. Hindi, actually, totoo naman. Paras talaga kami ni Lola. God bless her soul. So marami tayong pag-usapan dito, no? Are we in an era of world disorder? Are we in an age of disruption? Ito na ba talaga yung end ng liberalism, progressivism? In fact, these are the things I've been talking to my good friend, no, si Leloy Claudio from UC Berkeley over the past 72 hours. And we're hoping to arrange, finally guys, mag-reunion na naman tayo ulit with Leloy. Hopefully early next week. So we want to talk about this. Ito na ba? Ito na ba ang katapusan ng liberalism? Is this the beginning of really the age of this disruption? The age of populism, nationalism, nativism? Ito na ba? Ito na ba? And what does it mean for the rest of us who have a different vision about the future at ano na rin ng implication nito para sa opposition, no? Sa lahat ng pag-usapan natin, not to mention of course also what are the things we can expect under second Trump administration, including whether some of the people who we interviewed on this show could end up in very senior positions, including national security advisor or head of state department or number one or number two at the defense department, among others. So tignan natin yan. So alam niya naman, although I consider myself a progressive, I keep communication channels open with everyone. And not too dissimilar from the Joe Rogans of this world, I'm okay dealing with everyone from all sides. Although I have my own core convictions and ideas. And on a lot of issues, I'm more progressive than not. But nevertheless, I'm also conservative on certain issues. And I'm also considered as kind of more hawkish on certain foreign policy issues. No, so maybe down the road we would want to also have a conversation with some other folks na more uh, through and through progressive, no? Katulad ni Dr. Walden Bellew, for instance. Maybe we can talk to him also in the coming days. So, abangan yan. We're gonna arrange those things. And so for tonight, since we're ending a crazy, crazy week, it was really a crazy week in a sense that nothing was surprising really, but at the same time, this is it. We are in this world now. Honestly, anything is possible, including the end of liberal democracy as we know it, because that was the election in the most important country on earth. And alam naman natin, meron talagang demonstration effect. Things that happen in the US are already inspiring Marine Le Pen in France, who may most likely or very likely that the next French president will be also a right wing populist. Very, very likely also that the Alternative for Deutschland in Germany and Alemania will become not only the main opposition party, but likely also in a position to form the next government in the coming years if current trend lines continue. So all around the world, we're looking at big changes, big changes, and huge swing in favor of anti-establishment, anti-incumbency parties. No, so marami tayong kailangan pag-isipan. And usually when I feel that things are really going through a fundamental shift, binabalikan natin yung mga trabaho ng mga very deep thinkers. And one of them, of course, someone I really respect and throughout the years have read his work and also met him earlier this year during my visit to Stanford University is Professor Francis Fukuyama, who actually is quite conservative, I think, in his terms of his social positioning, his policies and all, policy outlook, someone who worked at the State Department back in the day, and is, of course, the author of The End of History and The Last Man, which is considered as one of the most influential, if not the most influential, works of political philosophy and predictions or prognostication about the 21st century. Now, meron siyang column kanina that very much um, consolidates a lot of um, not only feelings but a lot of predictions essentially he has about what the return of Donald Trump could mean. So first, let's talk about what the return of Donald Trump means in terms of big picture, and then tingnan natin yung epekto naman sa Pilipinas. All right. So all of these things are really interconnected. So the first thing you have to keep in mind, and Francis Fukuyama discussed this in his book The End of History, towards the end of the last Cold War. Ang point niya is sometimes there are changes we see that are just, may bagong development. Kumbaga, sabi nga ni Erap, bilog ang mundo. So, may mga panahon, guys, na may elections, may nanalo, at may pagbabago. Pero in the greater scheme of things, it does not really signal a significant shift in the direction of history or change in terms of political system. And then once in a while, may mga nangyayari talaga na hindi lang siya pagbabago sa kasalukuyan na sitwasyon, hindi lang siya pagbabago in terms of sinong nasa White House or Malacanang. Meron siyang sinisignal na more fundamental change. So kumbaga, if I'm gonna give you a metaphor, no, and this is the metaphor that a lot of historians use, isipin niyo yung dagat, no? So, pagdating sa dagat, there are at least three levels. Isa yung surface. No? So, yung surface ng dagat, kung may konting hangin, you can see already the waves, etc. So, usually that's what people see. This is the news. Like, you open the news channel, oh my God, there's may gera dito, may gera dyan. That's actually the surface. And then when you go deeper into the sea, I don't know if some of you have managed to swim during a little bit rough times. No, I sometimes made the foolish decision to kind of swim in during rough times. So actually, you go a little bit below, let's say 1 meter or two. It's so quiet down there, as if nothing is happening above, right? So that's the second layer, right? That's the second layer that most people don't see. But things that happen in that second layer, may kinalaman din eventually sa mga nangyari sa taas. In fact, sometimes that layer is even more important than what you see on the surface, yung so-called eventmentiel, everyday events. Dun sa baba, yun yung mas important. And then there's an even deeper, let's just call it deep history level. That's the tectonic plates sa ilalim ng mga oceans. And those tectonic plates once in a while move. And if they move, they create complete tsunamis. And then you're gonna see something really scary, right? From the center and then to the surface, and then you'll see a tsunami. That one most people don't see. It takes very perceptive people to look at tectonic shifts. So actually, ang tanong natin ngayon is, are we seeing not only a change dun sa pinaka-surface ng ocean, medyo nagsisurfing, medyo Villaferte, medyo surfer boy, medyo nag-ano dun sa kanyang Onitsuka na may balita na ba tayo yung isang Villaferte? Kung nag-raise na siya ng pera doon sa binenta niya mga surfer board niya, Onitsuka black niya, yung mga ganun. Um, so yun yung nakikita ng tao, yung sa taas. But actually, the tectonic shift below, those are the most important ones. Those are the ones that create your tsunami. And they're scary and transformational. The same, ganito rin sa kasaysayan. Ganon din sa politika. So si Francis Fukuyama was someone who said in the 1980s, 1989 pa lang, sabi niya, yung collapse of Berlin Wall, yung mga tao na tumakas essentially from Eastern Germany and from Hungary and Czechoslovakia and all of those countries pamunta sa West, that really meant the end of an ideological struggle between the Soviet Union and the West. At para sa kanya, panalo na yung West in terms of the game of, in the contest for who has the most attractive form of social organization. Free market capitalism with democratic institution versus socialism with essentially Russian attributes, no? So that's a tectonic plate that he was looking at. So back then, people were just looking at, ang ganda naman, nakatakas sa mga tao sa Germany, ganun. But very few people anticipated really the end of Cold War. Actually, 2 years after he wrote his first essay, The End of History with a question mark, at the Center for National Interest. And very few people also realized this was the beginning of an era of American hyperpower, right? Superpower America, no contestation. So now you have Fukuyama once again coming back and having this very interesting article. Actually, good news. You can read this for free. This is on Financial Times na. Check ko. So this is the article by Francis Fukuyama. I'll post it sa baba. Francis Fukuyama, What Trump Unleashed Means for America and the World. So you can actually read it. It's for free, so you don't need subscription to Financial Times. So ayon kay Francis Fukuyama, the election of Donald Trump is a new era, augurs a new era in U.S. politics and perhaps for the world as a whole, right? Very, very important yun. So there are a couple of points that he emphasizes dito sa article niya. Again, I suggest you guys really check it out. It's very, very important. Deep thinker yan si Francis Fukuyama. And as I said, he's actually quite conservative, and he works at the Hoover Institution in Stanford, which is known to be quite conservative, and he's very, very critical of woke liberalism. So Francis Fukuyama, as a political philosopher, goes to the basics. Pag-usapan natin yan. Ano bang ibig sabihin ng liberalismo? Pag sinasabi natin liberalismo, ano bang ibig sabihin yan? Ano bang tinutukoy natin? Pag ikaw ay medyo hindi, let's just say, exposed dun sa literature, pag sinabi natin liberalismo, people, politicians, parties come to mind. Liberal Party, Dilawan, etc. sa Philippines. US, Obama, Harris, woke, whatever. But actually, kung binalikan mo yung roots of liberalism, classical liberalism, which is something that Francis Fukuyama believes in, and to a certain degree, I also believe in. Lele Claude very much believes in, and he has a whole book in defense of that. Classical liberalism is basically this idea that you have to organize societies based on reason, based on pluralism, and based on the rule of law. Because if it's not based on reason, then it's going to be witch hunt, medieval stuff, all the barbarian stuff. If it's not based on facts, it's based on hearsay, it's based on gossip, etc. If it's not based on pluralism, then you're gonna have tyranny. And most likely you're gonna have what you had during the medieval age, whereby Catholics killing Protestants, Protestants killing Catholics, religious wars, etc. And also you have to have rule of law. Meaning, dapat meron tayong batas. At itong batas na to is arrived through, let's just say, social contract, meaning may say ang tao, nagre-reflect ito ng kultura ng tao, at ito ay nagpaprotect ng interest ng bawat citizen, including businesses, private property, right? The right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And the person behind liberalism is this English philosopher named John Locke. In fact, John Locke played an important role in the eventual establishment of the American Republic. John Locke's idea was America essentially could become a refuge for people from all around the world, especially in Europe, by embracing a republican, pluralistic, and reasoned based constitution, right? And he helped in the case of, for instance, Carolina, if I'm not mistaken, was it North Carolina? He helped with the establishment of the constitution there. And later on, essentially, yung life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, yung mga ganun, these are very much inspired by the works of John Locke. So para kay John Locke, hindi pwede na magkakaroon ka lang isang political system na base siya sa tyranny and fear, etc. Because back in the day, before John Locke, a lot of philosophers, including Thomas Hobbes among others, would argue that kailangan mo na isang matapang na leader, even dictatorial leader, kasi siyang magpro-provide ng stability for you. And if that means there's going to be some theocratic system, there's going to be lack of pluralism or respect for it, okay lang yan. Because at the end of the day, ang trabaho ng Estado is mag-provide, no? Na magkakaroon ng stability. And to a certain extent, even people like Niccolo Machiavelli would have argued along those lines. No? This is the job of the prince, creation of order, no matter what are the means. Para kay John Locke, hindi. We can do better than that. You can actually organize societies based on enlightenment values of reason, pluralism, and rule of law. And not to mention basic freedoms: freedom of expression, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, right? Yun po yung traditional liberalism. Yun po yung traditional liberalism. Hindi po yung Liberal Party, hindi yung mga katrapahuan, hindi yung mga Democratic Party na nakita natin. None of this. Alright, so let's be absolutely clear about that. That is what liberalism stands for. And yes, as correctly pointed out, if you look at works of Thomas Jefferson, if you look at the works of founding fathers of the US, they're very much inspired by Lockean ideas of freedom, republicanism, right? Yun po yung liberalism na sinasabi natin. Now, ayon kay Francis Fukuyama, over time, nagkaroon ng dalawang distortion sa liberalism. One form of liberalism that came out is yung tinatawag na neoliberalism. So this is essentially from 1970s onwards. Some would say until 2007 and 8, some would say until today. Ano ba ang ibig sabihin ng neoliberalism? Ang ibig sabihin po ng neoliberalism essentially is free market economics. Na ang pinakamahalaga is bigyan mo sa private, essentially sa capitalists, right? All the reins of power. Under a neoliberal system, you deregulate, you have minimal regulation of what big companies do, you have very strict protection of their property, you open your trade, your country to international trade and globalization, right? So you have a very minimalist state, but essentially very powerful private sector. So it's supposed to be for dynamism, for innovation, but essentially a system that benefits those who control capital, and in our era, those who are in charge of big tech companies, right? So it has a quite of a libertarian also strict to it. So if you look at the works of Elon Musk and Thiel and all of these South African guys, who are very influential, around Donald Trump, these people essentially are your newest version of neoliberalism, right? They want minimum regulation of Bitcoin. They want minimal regulation of SpaceX and Tesla, etc., so that they can thrive. Kasi sa kanila, ang problema is state intervention, right? Now, hindi ito lecture because I can talk about how did neoliberalism come about. Neoliberalism also came about because hindi nag-work yung New Deal Keynesian system that we saw from 1930s all the way to 1970s because of the phenomenon of stagflation. Now, hindi na ito lecture, but just to park it there, neoliberalism was one form of distortion of liberalism because this was all really about this, from a right-wing perspective, the globalist capitalism. So when US opened its borders to migration, it opened its financial system to capital flight. Ang nag-benefit is India, China, Mexico. Ang nag-benefit ay big companies, pero yung mga ordinary tao, hindi sila nag-benefit. So for Francis Fukuyama, and in fact many progressive thinkers also, that era of neoliberalism was a distortion of classical liberalism. In fact, it gave a bad name to liberalism. So when J.D. Vance comes out And may sinasabi si J.D. Vance about kailangan natin ibalik ang mga trabaho sa Amerika. Kailangan natin mag-onshoring. Hindi na pwede yung mga trabaho ng mga Amerikano na pupunta sa ibang bansa, sa Mexico, Vietnam, China. Dapat ibalik natin mga industriya. That is a rallying call against new liberalism. Although, as I said, it's quite contradictory because J.D. Vance comes from the big tech world, and the big tech world wants minimal regulation. So in a way, it's also a form of neoliberalism. But at least, ayaw nila yung globalization or globalist form of free market economics. So NAFTA, for instance, NAFTA, yung North Atlantic Free Trade Area, is an expression of neoliberalism. This idea na buksan natin yung ating pinto, ibaba natin ang traffic, like us make it easy for trade, etc. That's neoliberalism. That's one distortion. But this is where Francis Fukuyama gets quite controversial and gets hit from the other side. Because when you criticize neoliberalism, the people are going to piss off our big corporations, capitalists, Wall Street, right? All of these people who benefited from NAFTA, globalization, investment in China, and so on, so forth, so on and so forth. And then Francis Fukuyama wrote a book a few years ago on identity politics. And for him, the second distortion, according to Francis Fukuyama, is when liberalism went from emphasizing rule of law for everyone, it went from emphasizing equality before law and freedom for all individuals to a form of liberalism that is fundamentally focused dun sa kalagayan ng specific minority marginalized groups. Now, in principle, that should not be a problem, right? Because, of course, marginalized groups, uh, religious minorities, LGBTQ, among other things, they do deserve more, empowerment. Absolutely, they deserve more empowerment. They do deserve, uh, all sorts of, let's just call it, empowering policies that help them to overcome discrimination. Because totoo yan, may discrimination talaga sa mga minorities, sa LGBTQ, among other things. That's true. Pero para kay Francis Fukuyama, the problem kasi dito sa what he calls woke liberalism is that by fundamentally emphasizing, all right, and fundamentally just looking at the issue of certain minority rights, masyado niyang pinabayaan yung issue ng social justice, issue ng jobs. So if your liberalism is focused on identity, representation, oh, first woman, first African American, first, but you don't talk about yung mga trabaho ng mga ordinaryong Amerikano, especially yung mga white Americans, mga non-college educated Americans, yung mga Americans sa coal and mine areas na nawawala ng trabaho, right? What are you going to do about those people? How are you going to keep them on your side? So as Bernie Sanders correctly pointed out, right? As Bernie Sanders correctly pointed out, uh, as Bernie Sanders correctly pointed out, the Democratic Party lost the working class because it abandoned the working class long time ago by not paying attention dito sa interest, right? Interest ng working class people. All right. So this is very very important to keep in mind that the woke liberalism ended up very very much alienating and exclusionary towards, uh, especially in the case of U.S., the majority white population, especially to men, right, including Latino men. So, so ironically, woke liberalism was supposed to help minorities and push things in the right direction, but it ended up actually alienating a lot of other voters. And in fact, I'm just trying to pull out the numbers here, guys, para makita nyo. Lahat ng mga sinasabi namin ay base po ito sa these are based on the actual numbers and exit polls and interviews with the folks who are saying. In fact, this is not the first time this issue came up. This issue has been it also came up, sorry, back in 2016. Now, that doesn't mean that misogyny and racism is not an issue. Of course, it's an issue. But I don't know where can we get the data. But we have significant amount of people who openly said that ayaw nila ng woke. Ito. So this is the number. It's actually not the final pa. So this is the number you can see. Majority of white men, and actually even majority of white women, voted for Donald Trump, right? So, and the white population is more than, well, it's almost three-fourths of the entire electorate, right? So if you get the majority of them, it's game over. But interestingly, hindi reflected dito yan, but I saw in some of the numbers, Latino men also. It looks like the majority of Latino men also went to the Donald Trump side. So that means the problem dito sa woke liberalism is that from a political standpoint, it ironically comes up as almost exclusionary to the other group who are not given enough attention to. Now, Mark Lila, a number of liberal thinkers have been warning about this for quite some time. But guess what? Na-cancel sila. So this is the other problem we have, is that the quote-unquote woke culture we're seeing is also a little bit, sometimes, at least in the eyes of some people, a little bit impository, because when you raise any critique of it, you can be easily tagged as sexist, misogynist, racist, etc. And that's why many people were alienated. I know a lot of friends of mine who were staunch Democrats and were shocked by Donald Trump's victory in 2016. And a lot of them eventually just switched off or turned against the Democratic Party, as we know. And then some of them went strongly for Bernie Sanders. Why is Bernie Sanders important? Because Bernie Sanders' argument is, of course, we have to help the minority groups, women, immigrants, folks from immigrant backgrounds, marginalized groups, LGBTQ. Of course, you have to help them. But we also have to focus on social justice, jobs, middle class, cost of living. Ang argument ni Francis Fukuyama here is that what we saw with woke liberalism is an underemphasis on legitimate economic concerns of people, right? And an overemphasis on cultural issues, which opened the space for culture wars. So if you look at it, a lot of people who voted for Trump did not vote for Trump per se, but voted for Trump because they saw him as essentially their shield against what they saw as the excesses of woke liberalism. So that is what Francis Fukuyama is saying, is that what we're seeing right now is a rejection of both neoliberalism, globalization, and all of that, in favor of bringing back jobs to America. And second, also a rejection of woke liberalism, which has a lot of focus on culture issues, representation issues, but tends to underplay social justice, class issues, job issues, economy issue, inflation issues, right? Um, and dito tayo nagkakaroon ng problema, guys. Dito tayo nagkakaroon ng problema. So now we're seeing a far more fundamental problem, which, let's be honest, meron siyang implication sa atin. Bakit tayo may paki sa Pilipinas? Pansin nyo ba, yung ating version ng liberalismo ay hindi nagkakalayo dun sa version ng liberalismo sa Democratic Party in the US as we see it, right? Um, and let's not forget it. A lot of things I've seen in the US, in New Zealand, in Europe, are being imported into the Philippines. Including the woke rhetoric, including the cancel culture, right? In the same way that I saw a lot of importation of neoliberal thoughts. Oh, let's leave it to markets, let's deregulate, take out the state. Oh, next thing na, napakamahal lahat ng bagay kasi mga oligarchs ang lalo na control ng everything, di ba? But anyway, the other thing I also noticed is, if you look at traditional liberalism in the Philippines, it really doesn't propose anything fundamental in terms of changing our system, right? Actually, kay Digong ko lang nakita yung direct attack dun sa problema ng oligarkiya sa Pilipinas. Kay Digong ko lang nakita yung attack dun sa mga yung problema ng bakit mga ilang pamilya lang nagkakontrol ng lahat ng mga key sectors of our economy. Obviously, si Digong ay plastic at hypocrite because in the end, he ended up helping his own boys, yung mga Duterte garks. Si Dennis, yung mga, kailangan natin pamalanan ng ganyan. But, tama yun naman yung sinabi ni Digong na bakit ganyan yung oligarchy natin nagkakontrol. Now, name me one major liberal leader who has raised that issue. You tell me one. Sa lahat ng mga naging liberal candidates natin for presidency, how many of them have attacked the oligarchy in the Philippines? How many of them have said that we need a fundamental change in our trade, industrial, economic policies? Wala. Wala. No offense, wala. Right? How central, gaano ka na-emphasize yung issue ng workers' rights, yung karapatan ng mga manggagawa, right? yung mga ginagawa sa mga labor unions, kinakawawa yung mga labor unions. Last time I checked, I don't think central ito sa any of the liberal campaigns of any major liberal candidates in any of the Philippine elections. Please correct me. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm more than happy. Now, I've seen many things. I've seen, you know, um, ba- marami naman magagalit sa amin. We've seen the usual stuff, right? Transparency, accountability, kung walang corrupt, walang mahirap, mga ganyan. Okay, nakita natin, which is good. Wala naman akong problema dyan eh. Radical ng pagmamahal, nakita natin lahat yan. Pero, radical na pagbabago, things that you're hearing from JD Vance to Bernie Sanders, yung idea na dapat labanan natin yung mga corporations na hinahawak yung mga key sectors of our economy. We have to bring back jobs and create manufacturing. We have to have an aggressive industrial policy. We have to subsidize housing, create land reform. May narinig ka ba dun sa mga uh, standard liberal candidates? Hindi. Or kung may sinasabi sila, it's here and there just to tick the box. But hindi siya central message. Usually, ang central message lang, anti-corruption, accountability, malinis na gobyerno, ganun lang. Pero alam natin, hindi lang yung kailangan natin eh. Kahit hindi ka corrupt, kung hindi epektibo ang mga polisiya mo, kung hindi mo binibigyan ng sapat na atensyon, yung mga pangunahin na problema ng ating bayan, right? Yung oligarchic structure ng ating economy, yung lack of proper land reform, yung ating napaka-problematic at palpak na industrial and trade policy. Kung hindi mo inayos mo yan, kahit malinis ka pa, kahit wala ka pang corruption, bahit ng corruption, or bahit na duda sa inyong pagka-presidente, wala rin eh. Hindi mo rin mabago yung bayan eh. Kaya nga sabi ko nga, tingnan mo yung mga kapitbahay natin. Taiwan, Korea, China, Vietnam. Taas ng corruption sa mga bansa na yan. Oh my goodness. If only you bought, even Malaysia, my goodness, 1 MDB. But, maayos yung policy nila kumpara sa atin. Pagdating sa industrial policy, trade policy, land reform, nako, from Taiwan to Japan to Korea, China, lahat sila. Vietnam, nagkaroon ng land reform. Some of them socialist, some of them capitalist, liberal democratic, but nevertheless, lahat sila may mga radical na pagbabago na ginawa nila. Hindi lang radical na pagmamahal, radical na polisiya. Yun po ang medyo wala tayo sa Pilipinas at yun din po ang wala sa Democratic Party sa US. Sabihin mo sa akin, saan doon sa kampanya ni Barack Obama or Hillary Clinton or itong huli? In fact, I would say Biden is slight exception because in fairness to Biden, marami siyang policies, the CHIPS Act and among other things na actually tumutulong sa pagbabalik ng mga ibang trabaho sa Amerika, especially in semiconductors and all. And I think Biden, because he comes from Delaware, better understands yung kalagayan ng mga poorer states in the US and the working class, the white working class in the US. Pero halos pag tinignan mo lahat ng democratic establishment, they really have nothing to offer on fundamental issues affecting ordinary Americans and in the same way also dito sa Pilipinas. So the lessons for us are very clear. Are very clear. I'm all for more rights for minority groups, LGBT groups, etc. Yes, I believe in pluralism. I believe in secularism. I believe in reason. Pero para sa akin, hindi pwede hanggang pakyut lang. Hindi lang pwede hanggang identity politics only ang liberalism. To defeat populists, to bring back progressive democratic politics, you have to do something way more than that. Hindi pwede yung clean government lang. You have to do something more fundamental than that. And that's the thing that we want to explore in the coming days and coming weeks with our guests. So abangan yan, marami tayong mga kausapin ng mga tao to explore what is the way forward for liberalism. Because itong back-to-back na talo ng mga Democrats in election after election, yes, you can talk about racism, misogyny, I'm not denying those things. But you cannot also deny na medyo laos na yung old-style liberalism. Or actually, not old-style, contemporary-style liberalism. You need something different. Otherwise, people are gonna lose belief in you. Otherwise, people are gonna give up on you. Otherwise, people are gonna go to populists and protectionists and scammers and demagogues. Tuloy-tuloy lang yan hanggang wala na. Tapos ng laban. On that note, thank you very much. It's already 12 na, so officially we're gonna enter the Sabbath day, so I have to end all of this political discussion and get back to a more spiritual life. Very, very much thank you sa lahat ng mga nanonood sa atin, mga na-comments, mga suggestions, statements of support or prayers throughout the weekend years. These are difficult times. These are really hard times in the sense that talagang mapapaisip ka, ano ba ang talagang kailangan natin? Kailangan po natin ng radical na pagbabago. Pero paano natin gawin na political campaign or message ito? Because kung hindi natin gawin ito ng tama, mga voters pupunta talaga sila sa mga katulad ni Trump or even Duterte again. I won't be surprised. God bless and talk to you soon. Pahinga na rin kayo and also have a blessed Sabbath day with your family loved ones. I hope you'll have your spiritual reflections and all of that. And looking forward to catching up with you guys sa ating mga followers from Qatar, from Emirates, from US, from Florida, from Los Angeles, from Quezon City, all across the country who have been watching us and supporting us throughout the years. I'm telling you guys, you don't see it, but actually for me, etong mga ginagawa natin, metas and vlogs, give me an opportunity to also think deeper, reflect on some of my ideas. Sometimes nagsusulat ako and then pumupunta ako dito. Minsan andito ako, nagsasalita ako, tapos bumabalik ako, nagsusulat ako. And thank also our supporters from New York, among other places. So please don't take what I'm saying personally. I'm not here to attack your part, your side. I'm just sharing my ideas. And anyone who knows me and who has been following us throughout the years knows that I'm probably the most open-minded person intellectually out there. I'm willing to listen to you, whether you're Republican, Democrat, Green, Bernie, whatever. Maybe not RFK Jr. that much, but you get what I'm saying. Um, Even yung mga ka-DDS, ka-loyalists, kakamping, lahat, marami tayong mga followers from across the political spectrum. I may have some serious disagreement with some of you folks on some issues, but I hear people, I see you, I understand why people are so emotionally worked up about politics. At the end of the day, we all want a better world. But we cannot get that better world if we do not appreciate the world as it is and then figuring out how to get to the promised land. Salamat, God bless, and talk to you soon.